This is probably the moment that will define Trump's legacy. Once the self-proclaimed president of peace who promised no more forever wars, Trump has betrayed his own pledge and launched a war that could make the Iraq and Afghanistan conflicts look like a walk in the park. Starting a war is easy. Getting out of one can be very hard, and Trump, soon to be 80, is learning that lesson the hard way. Every responsible person, when facing decisions with enormous consequences, takes the time to study the problem deeply and analyzes every angle of it as good as it can. Trump, on the other hand, seems to base his decisions on instinct, gut feeling, or whatever he feels in his bones.
And I had to take an excursion. We had the greatest economy in history. We still do. Oh, this will bounce right back. When it's over, and I don't think it's going to be long, when it's over, this is going to bounce right back so fast.
When are you going to know when it's over?
When I feel it.
Okay.
I feel it in my bones.
Will you ask anybody in particular? Would that be some of these...
The problem is that the other people in this world, the Iranians, the Chinese, the Russians, don't make decisions based on what they feel in their bones. They rely on careful analysis and advice from experts. Trump has been lucky so far because the United States is an incredibly powerful country that can absorb many of his mistakes. But we're getting closer to the point where those mistakes will finally catch up to him. His decision to start a trade war with China left him humiliated when the Chinese fought back and pushed him into a corner. His obsession with buying or conquering Greenland alienated some of America's closest and most reliable allies. It also seems that Trump chose members of his administration based on gut feeling and their willingness to praise him rather than on actual competence. Otherwise, it's hard to explain how people like Pete Hegseth ended up in such important positions.
Never has a modern military been so rapidly and historically obliterated, defeated, from day one with overwhelming firepower. The air camp, we negotiate with bombs. You have a choice.
The level of this administration is so low that they couldn't even agree on a coherent explanation for why they attacked Iran.
To the members of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, the armed forces, and all of the police, I say tonight that you must lay down your weapons and have complete immunity, or, in the alternative, face certain death. Finally, to the great proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
In his very first message announcing the attack, Trump made the goal crystal clear: regime change. He urged Iranians to take over their government and seize their moment of freedom. But days later, he completely changed the story, claiming the strikes were necessary because Iran was about to launch a first strike against the United States. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Marco Rubio offered yet another version. He said the US had to strike because Israel was about to attack Iran, and that Iran would retaliate against both Israeli and American forces in the region. According to Rubio, the US decided to join in preemptively to protect American troops. Then there's War Secretary Pete Hegseth. He insisted this was not a regime change war at all. It was simply about destroying Iran's missiles, navy, and nuclear capabilities once and for all. Make of that what you will. On top of everything, Trump also blamed failed nuclear negotiations, a claim directly contradicted by the Omani mediators who said talks were making substantial progress right up until the strikes began. Since his genius gut feeling led him into uncharted waters, Trump seems to resort to another familiar tactic, lying non-stop in the hope that people will eventually believe his lies instead of reality.
We killed all their leadership, and then they met to choose new leaders, and we killed all of them. And now we have a new group, and we can easily do that, but let's see how they turn out. We have really regime change. You know, this is a change in the regime because the leaders are all very different than the ones that we started off with that created all those problems. So this was, I think we can say, Jason, this is regime change, right?
Then there are the Iranians. Despite controlling the Strait of Hormuz, through which 20 to 25% of the world's oil normally flows, Trump claims they are begging him to negotiate and make a deal.
They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. And it was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. And I'm not going to tell you what that present is, but it was a very significant.
Yes, you heard that right. The people whose leader was killed, along with thousands of others, are now interested in sending gifts to Trump. The problem for Trump is that lying stops working once people are hit by reality. Americans are already paying higher fuel prices, which will soon be converted into higher inflation. As the war continues, more American soldiers will die. He may be able to temporarily manipulate oil prices to keep them low, but only for a few days. The more he lies and spins reality to suit himself, the more even his own supporters will stop believing him. Trump never learned what Abraham Lincoln said. You can fool some people all of the time, and all of the people some of the time, but you cannot fool all of the people all of the time. The truth is that Trump is stuck in a terrible situation. Even if he stops the attacks and tries to claim victory, Iran is unlikely to allow the free flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz. The reason is simple. Iran has already been attacked twice in the middle of negotiations over the past year. What guarantee do they have that the United States and Israel won't simply prepare another strike in a few months? From Iran's perspective, the war can only end when they receive clear, credible guarantees that such attacks will not happen again. For Trump, however, retreating without reopening the strait would be seen as a defeat, even a humiliation, since he is the one that started this conflict. To avoid that humiliation, he may be tempted to escalate the war. If that's his next move, he's going to discover the hard way that Iran is not Venezuela. Iran is Vietnam. Iran is one of the greatest civilizations in human history, and its people have preserved many of the traits that made them great in the past. Even if Iranians are generally dissatisfied with the theocratic regime, when a foreign country bombs their infrastructure and kills thousands of their people, the masses will rally around the flag. One of Trump's biggest mistakes was believing that the same playbook that worked in Venezuela would also work in Iran. But the Iranians have prepared extensively for this war. It was obvious to everyone that conflict was coming. They have studied America closely and have likely studied how other nations managed to beat or outlast the United States in the past. One important case study is the Vietnam War. The Vietnamese knew they could never match America's military might on the battlefield. Instead, they understood that America's greatest vulnerability is its internal politics. In a democracy with free elections, free media, and a public sensitive to human casualties and financial costs, a long war can create immense pressure on politicians. Vietnam treated US public opinion as the central battlefield, the key to winning the war. Even though they lost almost every conventional battle, they dealt enough casualties and costs to turn the American people against the war. In any war, the ability to endure pain is often more important than the ability to inflict pain. In this equation, Iran clearly has the greater capacity to endure suffering than the American public. Most Americans have no good reason to accept these costs because the administration's propaganda has failed to convince them that this is a just or necessary war. Recent opinion polls in the US show little public support for the conflict. As the war continues and American casualties mount, opposition will only grow stronger. Trump now faces two bad choices: end the war now and suffer the political consequences, or escalate further. But these options are not equally bad. Ending the war now would allow him, at least in theory, to rehabilitate his presidency. However, if he chooses to escalate, the consequences could be far worse. The entire world would suffer from his stupid mistakes. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please give it a like and consider subscribing. I'll see you in the next video.